Hi everybody, thanks for the questions again. I'd like to take this opportunity to combine two of the questions about giraffe vocalizations and put them together into one, because they're very, very similar. So the first aspect is, do giraffe have a voice box? And the answer is yes, most definitely so. In fact, the voice box is very, very similar to the equines, the zebra horse group. And most people have come to the belief that they don't have a voice box purely because when you're observing giraffe during the day, you very rarely hear them make any noises, if ever. The exceptions may well be when they're highly stressed, whether it be in social interactions, chased by predators, or even getting stressed out by vehicles and people and so on. When they're capable of making squeals and whistles and bleats and really sort of stressful, high-pitched sounds. And at the end of the day, that's probably to do with the fact that they're exerting and pushing a lot of air out through the voice box, which allows it to produce sounds that are quite audible to us. Now, humans don't have the greatest hearing, so often we tend to make reference to animals making sounds and not producing sounds based on what we can actually hear. And as I've just said, our hearing is not particularly good. So we can hear down to about 20 hertz for people who've got very good hearing, and then it goes up to close on 20,000 odd hertz. That's our range. So we hear a lot up into the higher frequencies. Now, so-called infrasound is sound below the audible range of human hearing, so essentially below 20 hertz. And many times giraffe are referred to loosely as having a communication in the infrasound range, but it really isn't lower than 20 hertz. Typically it's between 20 hertz and say 100 hertz, or just a little bit over. And it's still quite low, and for some people it will be totally inaudible, but for the most part it can be heard by people as a sort of a very low rumbling or humming type of sound. Most of your low frequency sounds tend to get the air to resonate. It tends to be a sort of a vibration more than a sound, a typical sound as we would classify one anyway. And giraffe actually have been recorded to do this in studies they found to try and determine what type of communications they have. It is mostly at night that they tend to do this, if not entirely at night in certain individuals. Look, it hasn't been a holistic study. They haven't done giraffe populations throughout the whole world. It's based mainly on captive giraffe, but one would think that the nocturnal communications would be a way of giraffes staying together. Now, giraffes don't generally live in close-knit communities. It's a very sort of fluid society, the individuals coming and going as they see fit. But you will, for a large part, see females, particularly with dependent young, hanging around together. Now, in the day, being as tall as they are and having fairly good eyesight, they would rely on visual communication. But at night, when it's getting dark and they're not potentially seeing as well as some of the other antelope, and certainly not as well as the predators, they would rely on vocalizations to stay together. Now, obviously, vocalizations that would be heard by a range of other animals, particularly in the upper range. Now, predators, cats and so on, the hunters of giraffe would tend to hear in the higher frequencies. So it stands to reason that communicating in the lower frequencies down below 100 hertz, as I said, I wouldn't say it would make it necessarily impossible for the cats to hear them, but it would make it less likely for them to find the giraffe. And the giraffe, by doing so, would be able to at least stay within contact with one another. And many animals actually use vocalizations like this to stay together for protection, to reduce mortality. If you think of some of the primates like gorillas, for example, mongooses, many of the pigs, warthogs and forest hogs and so on. So they'll make these types of sounds. So that's how giraffe are communicating. And as I said, it is primarily at night, less so in the day, because then visual communication takes over. The voice box is quite interesting as well, because giraffe, due to their anatomy, the distance from the lungs to the voice box is probably 3.5 meters, if not more. And that provides challenges, because for an animal to produce sound through its larynx, the voice box, you need to have air being expelled from the lungs through at quite a force, getting the parts of the voice box to resonate and vibrate and so on, and that produces the sound, which is then articulated through the mouth and the lips and the tongue to make various sounds. Now, that sound the air is not being pushed through at a force great enough to produce those high frequency sounds. You're not going to have an auditory communication through the day that you're going to be able to hear, as far as humans are concerned anyway. So it might well be the length of the trachea of the giraffe that means that they're not making a lot of sounds that are that are clearly audible to human beings. And it's why when potentially stressed and exhaling with force that they are able to produce some of those higher frequencies. So I hope that answers the question. It's certainly a thought-provoking and interesting one. More research has to be done on giraffe communications than, like I said, they haven't done a lot of wild populations. And to my knowledge, there's not any details yet that have been found as to how these different sounds and frequencies and humming or rumbling sounds might pertain to different types of social interaction. So that's something that will hopefully come to bear in the years to come. Great. Well, I look forward to some more questions and maybe some more on giraffe, because there's a lot of interesting things we can discuss about giraffe. Thanks very much. Cheers.